Yo, Jason. Hello?
Yo, I can kind of hear you.
Right. Cool, man.
There you go. It's a little better.
Awesome. So, yeah, this is Wear the Crown Podcast, episode 10, with my man Blood Pressure.
Hey, greetings, Jason.
And we got...
Hey, how's it going?
Going great, man. Happy New Year.
You too, man.
Yeah,
I can't believe January's already come and gone. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah, man.
Yeah, now Jason Scott Arnold, that's what you go by, I know, and we have a mutual friend, which was Matt Marshall, who was on the podcast, episode 8, and he highly recommended I should talk to you and referred you. He thought you'd be like a good person to interview and have on and like kind of tell your story about what you got going on. And you guys located in Oregon, right?
I'm actually a little further south. I'm in Mendocino, Northern California.
Okay, Mendocino. That's what's up.
Cool.
And why don't you explain who you are? And I kind of, obviously this is about cannabis and we love weed. And we were just talking a whole lot about it right before we called you. So it was perfect. It was like a perfect transition. We were like, this conversation is going to be great. So, yeah, man, why don't you tell a little bit about like how you got started in the business and what got you into it?
Will do, man. Well, I appreciate Matt Marshall recommending me, man. That guy is a wealth of knowledge when it comes to large-scale commercial cultivation. I mean, I cannot even describe his depth of knowledge on the subject, but, we all share, the love of the plant, the ganja. And, I grew up in Prohibitionist Texas, and it's still far from legal there. They do have a small CBD only medical program, but I grew the plant there in my closet for years, and eventually I became a homeowner and decided that it wasn't worth the risk. Living in Prohibitionist Texas, I didn't want the G-men to come kicking my door down over 20 plants or whatever.
Yeah,
and so. I did the business thing for a few years and really didn't enjoy, doing real estate, running the family business. And so, I asked my wife, can we go somewhere where I can legally cultivate, where I don't have to worry about, real world repercussions for a couple plants. And she's like, we can go to California or Colorado. And at the time, Colorado had a much more established regulatory framework, and I somewhat naively thought that because I got a business background and I could easily slide into a grow and get a nice sort of like gig running a grow. And at the time this was 2016, and so what the market was like. People in Denver needed people with big ag experience, people who at least knew how to operate a dosatron or an Argus, and preferably had experience with metric. And at the time I had none of that. And so, I sucked it up, found a place that, looked like they were doing really cool things. And, I took a $12 an hour entry level position. We sold our McMansion in Texas, bought a 600 square foot house there in Denver. And,
wow.
I started the grind. I was hungry, dude. I wanted it, man. Like I wanted to do it legally. And, I started grinding, and after, a few months, somebody realized that I was underemployed and that, I could do more than just, irrigate, prune. I was good at it and I loved being hands-on plants, but, I could contribute more. And, your boy, Matt Marshall, big ups, dude. He sort of recognized that, I could do more, and he got me on his, training and auditing team. And it, was really cool, man. We were operating in like 13 states at the time, and, it afforded me the opportunity to, be able to go to other states and teach people how to grow cannabis, at large scale, really high quality cannabis.
Yeah,
and,
that's awesome.
it was awesome, man. I can't even tell you. And, did that for a while. And, at a certain point, kind of on the side, I was developing mobile apps to mitigate data loss. So, we were going to all these different facilities across the U.S. and, more or less they're handwriting information down about, what they're growing, what they're doing, what the yield is, and not doing anything with that information. And I thought that was crazy because, you've got all these different environments, some, crazy retrofits, some greenhouses, some, beautiful built, like Ferraris, I call them, purpose built, beautiful.
Yeah.
And they're growing all these different varieties, and they're not, writing any of this information down. And so sort of as like a side gig, I developed some of these apps. And at one point, there was some change in leadership in that organization, and new CFO came in, and he saw what I was doing, and he thought it was valuable. And so that sort of became my full-time thing for a while. And, I developed some really cool applications to, gain insight into how temperature, humidity, airflow impact yield, and, how, we could move certain cultivars to certain areas to, do better. And, I did that for a while, and it was all fun and whatnot. And I enjoyed contributing, that kind of value. But, I found myself disconnected from the plant and, kind of back where I started. And so an opportunity sort of developed out here in Northern California, and I jumped at the chance.
Wow. Now with all that, that's awesome, man. That's, leaps and bounds within the industry from where you started, for sure. And it's cool that you can hear it in, how you talk about it, real passionate and about it. And that's awesome. Now with the, go ahead, blood pressure.
Hey, man, are those apps alive? Did those apps survive? Are they something that people are utilizing?
So those apps in that iteration are more or less the proprietary information of that organization.
Nice.
Now, with that said, since moving to California, I've really tried to do more outreach on, how to collect data and how to leverage it. You don't need an app to do it. Once you hit a certain size and, you're collecting a lot of various data points, then it makes sense to, maybe spend the money on a piece of software or your own, internal app that you've developed. But man, for the most part, you can do a lot of that really powerful stuff with just spreadsheets, and not even like complex spreadsheets, just like, basic. And so my big thing, I've taught a couple classes out here in Northern California, and my big thing is just, start recording the data, figure out, kind of what your primary goals are. And, minimum, cultivar, where it was grown, and then from there, yield, post-harvest information. But if you start with just that basic stuff, you can extrapolate a lot of really valuable information.
No, I totally
definitely
agree.
Just doing that kind of analysis.
Yeah, man.
Totally. Well, and then if you start with just that information, then I'm sure you guys are super high-level operators. You could overlay the environmentals, and then, you start seeing patterns, and then you start seeing how, maybe a lower VPD early in flower, leads to more node sites, and then, you get a higher yield, and blah, blah, blah. You start being able to quantify the stuff that you guys are already seeing and feeling in the grow.
Yeah, definitely. And I was going to ask with the apps and the data, collecting it. Well, first off, highly respect that, because coming from concentrates and processing and doing all that stuff and working with material, a lot of our moves are based off of data and collection of data. Our adjustments and how we process what the material or what strain it is, and at what how many grams to process it at. All that stuff is based all on data collection. And when you get into growing, what I've figured out, or what I realized, I'd hear all my friends that were growers, or like Matt or other people that I've worked with, that I had to talk to about, product coming in, would always complain about certain things about, there's like, I call them like grower complaints. Like you don't really know it unless you're involved in it. And then you start realizing,
right.
You start realizing, and it's like it's pretty much dealing with other people's habits and how they handle things, and and how far they're willing to go on being open to actually collecting this data and looking at it in a different way. You know what I mean? And to put it to use, I guess, is the best way to say it. So with the
proof is in the pudding, but I've definitely experienced that where somebody's really into, this is how I've done it. You've always got to be open to learn. And I think that the data is just another way to gain insight into an area that, might feel or seem intuitive, but it really gives you the hard numbers, man. Like, and I have mad respect for the hash guys. I mean, there's stuff that, in the dried flower form that might look fine, that, once you get down to the glands, man, it's, the proof is in the pudding again, and the numbers speak, man.
Yeah, definitely. So with the app now, is that something I'm just intrigued about the app real quick. I just want to ask this: is when you say someone is using the app at the facility, are they manually every day just logging in, like say humidity, temp, or yield of whatever harvest? Is that something that has to be added in manually, or is there some way this app is just collecting it off of a sensor of some sort, or how does it kind of work? I guess so.
That's a really good question. So it depends. So, with post-harvest type information like, wet weights, the dry down, trim to flower, a lot of that information is going to be, you're going to be getting the information by hand. And so, it's harder to automate. Now with things like temperature, humidity, airflow, light intensity, fertility of the media, mixes, pH, all that stuff, that can be automated. And man, there are some really cool platforms out there. I want to give a shout out to 30 megahertz. They have a really cool platform. They're not cannabis specific, and so something that I've seen across the space is that if somebody has a solution that is specifically for cannabis, whether it's software or sensors or a metric integration or whatever, there's often a green tax associated. And so I always encourage anybody, like if you're looking at a software solution, look at another market and see what a similar solution would cost. And, make sure you're not getting taxed. And so I really like 30 megahertz because they're just in the ag space. And they're a platform, that does all the smart sensor stuff. And so, the sensors are a little costly up front. They're pretty cheap on the monthly, but you can deploy, a ton of different sensors, all the stuff I mentioned before, and have this platform that you can just log into, that everything is automated. You can set up alerts, VPD, temperature, humidity, whatever, hits a certain range, and, it's out of your parameters. You can get text messages, blah, blah, blah. It's a pretty cool platform. And so I would definitely, if you're interested in, deploying some sort of platform to automate all of that type of information, it's definitely one to check out.
Yeah, I've been. That sounds pretty cool. I was interested in with what is our system? I can't remember offhand, but it's not as up to date as it could be with some of the technology that's out there. And I'd love to see some of that automated in our facility, where you can just walk in and on like a keypad you can actually see, or like an iPad where you can actually see what everything is running in real time. So yeah, man. Sorry,
that's what you're looking for. And what's really cool is they've got these awesome graphs. You can set up different dashboards. So say, you've got cultivation technicians that need to see one thing. Then you've got, your manager level guys that may be keyed into more aspects, more rooms, that you can control all that, and you can set up your own graphs. Like they've got heat maps. And so, I know you and I have talked previously about identifying the best space in the greenhouse for certain varieties. Yep. This really, like green and red, like you could see it visually. And for me personally, like I said, it always just confirms, the things that we're already seeing and feeling in the grow.
Yeah, and that's the system I was referring to was our Wadsworth system. Because,
Wadsworth,
totally. I couldn't think of it there for a minute, but the Wadsworth system, seeing that, I would love to see ours get upgraded, and I'm actually here in the near future, I think we're going to be doing a lot more upgrades, and they have one that's connected to your app, or to your phone, and it has an app, and the newer model, so that everything's digital, and like you're saying, all the readings are there in like real time, and everyone can see it, and you'll get alerts on your phone if say the humidity spikes at 3:00 in the morning, which can happen. More than likely, you know what I mean? It more than likely can and will happen at some point.
Definitely.
But that's really cool. And I guess trying to get back on to where you're at now. So from the apps, and then worked your way up to the auditing with Matt, and from there, what transpired?
So I did a little bit of consulting. I got to work with some really cool firms, and that was just more same thing, coming in as somebody who's done the large scale thing. The other thing I did for that big multi-state operator was developed a learning management system. So we took a lot of the stuff, we developed a curriculum around what's needed to grow, under their sort of methodology. And so, we filmed things that were task-based, so pruning. We showed, these are what the prunes look like, these are when and why they happen. to really try to make it a scalable methodology. And, so did that for a bit. And then, the culture at that company really changed, man. When I started, it was awesome. Everybody was like Matt Marshall. Everybody was passionate cultivators, dedicated to the craft. Everybody was growing outside of work, in some capacity. Big emphasis on, providing for the medical community. And, how a lot of these new cannabis companies are, they're focused on growth. They wanted to take over Canada, and it wasn't the fit for me anymore. So, did the consulting thing for a bit. And then when an opportunity opened up in Northern California to work for, guys who, have a relationship with the plant, and that, they understand, they're not here to just make money. They're here to, feed the soil, if you will. And, I took an opportunity, and so now I'm the senior director of cultivation with Henry's Original. They're a decent-sized multi-farm operator up here in Mendocino, and we grow some of the best sun-grown cannabis in the world. And I'm really thankful for guys like, Matt Marshall, who, influenced me and supported me along the way.
Yeah, big up Matt for sure, man. Definitely. I also would like to shout out to my brother Dave Stormy.
Storm Green,
yeah, man. Those guys, there's people like that you really feel the passion, and they're there for the love, and they're good people. And Matt alone has been a mentor, someone I've mentored to in this business, as well as a couple other different people that have helped me reach further my skills, and not just that, but keep that passion alive, where it doesn't feel like I'm doing something that's like droning and for someone else that I don't, a job that I don't want to do. So yeah, man, that's pretty awesome. You've made leaps and bounds, and while we were sitting here talking, I was like, damn, I feel like I could be doing more, because
oh, get out of here! You guys do so much, and I am so thankful to even be considered to talk to you on a podcast like this. Your whole saga, as a medical, I want to say you were prosecuted, dude. The whole thing is fucked, and so I feel you as a father. I could not imagine going through what you had to go through.
Yeah, man.
So mad respect.
Bless up, brother. So yeah, man. So leaps and bounds, and now with Henry's, you guys, you said multi-licenses. So I know we were talking previously before, and you're like 7 licenses total, and you guys are operating with?
Yeah, and so we're scaling pretty fast. We had 4 farms last season. We're at 7 this season. We're growing, man, and we're doing good. We have tried a couple different methodologies. We're really pushing more towards sustainability. We are expanding our, who we call, native soil planting directly in the ground. There's going to be a whole conversation around terroir and, everything that goes into, sun-grown cannabis. And so we're trying to stay ahead of all that.
Nice. And under those licensings, I guess that's different size, the amount of plants that you're growing. I take it they're not all like the same amounts. And when we were talking, you were talking about you guys got some hoop houses and a couple greenhouses. Is that right? Or
so yeah, what's unique about Mendo and a lot of the Emerald Triangle, it's got a really good climate, and so as far as producing flower, you can produce really high quality product without a lot of infrastructure. You don't necessarily need a nice glass house, with dehumidifiers and heat and a wet wall and, all that stuff. You can get away with just high tunnel hoop houses that are, you see them in berry production and other things. Yep. And they're basically just PVC pipes with the plastic sheeting. And so
yes, I'm quite familiar.
7 flower licenses are all that. So they call it mixed light because we're light deprivating, and then also providing a small amount of supplemental light, if we're going to try to continue vegging out in the field. And so the 7 licenses are 10,000 square foot, and so they're relatively small. Mendocino has kept the caps pretty small, and so it's an acre and a half total. We get 2 harvests on that a year, and then we also have a nursery license. And the nursery is primarily at this point to support our growing operations, but we do have several cultivators out here that we provide them genetics. We really specialize in heritage varieties, Blue Dream, Afgooey, a couple Jack crosses, the classics. And so, we do that as well, but, big focus is on flower production.
Okay, awesome. And one of my first questions is, how do you keep that, cool, I guess, or air flowing through those hoop houses? Is that really an issue or not, or do you guys have pretty stable humidity and temp wise to where airflow is not an issue pushing through those houses? I was just curious.
No, that's a great question, man. Humidity is always a concern. One thing that's nice about the climate here is it's very Mediterranean. It's extremely dry, extremely dry. I can't even tell you. So during the winter, you have a few months of rain, and then by April or so, it turns off, and it's off until it rains again. And so it's pretty dry, but the airflow is really important. And so we try to take a page from the greenhouse or the indoor guys, and we really try to manage VPD. And so the temperature and the humidity are always in our sights. And so there's a few techniques. We take the ends off. We have large fans that really facilitate movement through the hoops. But then there's also roll-up sides. And so, if we need to get more airflow, we'll roll up the sides. And if it's a scenario where it's still stagnant, we'll take the plastics off altogether. But that's a really good question. It's a different, there's no Wadsworth. You are the Wadsworth.
Yeah, no, I'm familiar. A couple of years ago, I built my own little hoop house, and I had enough space, and it wasn't anything crazy. Probably at least like 10 to 15 plants. But what I noticed is, I had one end of it draped, and I rolled up that end to allow more airflow in, and man, it made a world of difference just to get that airflow moving. And just when you were saying that, I was thinking, man, how do you get that stagnant air moving throughout those? Because I'm sure, they're fairly long, but that makes sense with rolling up the sides. Even with our greenhouse, we have the, you obviously know, with like microclimates and like airflow kind of as plants start to get bigger and the whole house starts to get a little bit more denser, that airflow isn't really moving as much. You can have those stagnant spots. And I propose like, hey, why don't we maybe slice some vents into the side of the panel? Because it's like, obviously plastic, and we could slide some vents in to where we can kind of cover it and open it at will to allow that airflow. And they're like, guy who's our facilities manager was like, nah, that's not really the way this works as far as the greenhouse goes. And I was like, well, man, it's an idea. Like, that should be out the water quite yet. I mean, I think it's worth a shot. But so
you'll have side vents. We've got side vents on our nursery greenhouses, and they're super helpful for that exact reason. Is just getting a little air movement, helping with the air exchange at overnight particularly is great for, quelling any sort of powdery mildew. And so, the side vents are awesome if you got them.
Yeah. Now, you said there was one, I don't know if it's all of them, but you said you do like 2 turns a year as far as harvesting goes. Now, is that the whole plot of, does it go from veg to everything's in flower, and then it's one massive chop, or do you guys chop in like a periodically, like every week or every other week? Or
honestly, man, it's probably the hardest part at this point. It's hard to describe. So Mendocino is very hilly, and a lot of our legacy sites are just that, man. They're out on the hill. They're hard to access. They're very steep. Harvest takes a minute. And so, previously it was kind of just like a 3-week grind. We were just trying to get out what's ripe when it's ripe off the different sites. And we're trying to be more methodological this season. We're really planned it out. And so we're growing fewer varieties at each site. And so, you know how that works. It's obviously easier to dial in for 1, 2, or 3 varieties instead of running 25. They've got different feeding needs. They like different climates. There's a lot at play there. And so doing that, we're hoping things, ripen in a certain time. And what's also very interesting is we have lots of microclimates at play. And so, for example, we've got sites that are less than a mile apart as the crow flies, but they might be 10 to 15 degrees different on a given day. And so we're really trying to use that to our advantage and put the varieties that like, certain conditions in those places.
Yep.
And so we're going to be a little better suited this season. It was also our first year using metric. You guys there in Colorado, you guys are like pros. And so for us, it presented a lot of challenges. It's our operating situation is unique. So we have to harvest, and then we have to transfer those plants immediately to a different license. We're driving all the plants down the hill to the processing center where we have the infrastructure to dry and cure. And so there's a lot of moving parts.
Yeah,
and
that
we
is
learned a lot this season, and we're going to be better prepared next season.
Yeah, that is a lot to take into account, I guess, not really realizing it when you've got it all laid out and then you kind of initially start it. There's some realizations that probably occur where you're like, holy shit, we're doing some hiking right now while we're harvesting. It's kind of what it sounds like you're checking up the hill like a real ganja farmer. And,
Yeah, man.
you know what I mean? So
yeah, man. Yeah, exactly. It's. I'll send you pictures. Some of them are kind of ridiculous.
that'd be awesome, man. Yeah, definitely check them out.
This might be an unusual question, but do you think that the plants that grow on a hillside are stronger than plants that grow on a flat, level surface?
I don't know about the hillside, but there's definitely, to your point, it's windier on the hillside. And so, now that you say it, I can think of we have one upper deck. It's, I don't know, maybe 2,000 or 3,000 square foot of a 10,000 square foot license. And the plants are always so stocky. And to your point, it's probably from the wind and just getting beat around all day.
Yeah.
But to that end, they're always super resinous. The trike content is through the roof. The terps are through the roof, and
it's like they're put in a strenuous environment that they have to adapt to, versus one that's very, like a level, flat surface. The one that's on the hillside is more extreme.
Yeah.
And
totally. The hills, man, they're typically quite a bit higher here. Like we have one that's probably 3,000 foot elevation versus 800, and so higher light intensity, more
right.
UV.
True. Yeah, that one I hadn't even thought of, but
Yeah,
the
that's
elevation is different too, right?
Totally. The valleys also, man, they get cold, and so during the winter months, you experience this weird inversion where the hills are actually warmer. The cold air settles, and the hills are like beautiful, and it's like freezing in the valley. And so,
wow.
We were trying to more of the purple varieties down in the valley, and more of the varieties that aren't as prone to, taking the frost well up on the hill for the last harvest.
Nice. Yeah, man. And now with as far as like soil, and what are you guys doing for that? Are you amending? What's that look like?
So we have a few different methodologies. Like I said, the legacy method was typically pots, big, smart pots. So what's interesting about California is you can kind of look at what people were doing. It was always a consequence of the regulations. So in the 215 days, you could get away with 99 plants. And so people would grow, 600, 800 gallon smart pots and just grow monsters because it was a plant count thing. Once it became a square footage thing, it became about the light deprivation because, you're limited on square footage. You're going to run a higher planting density, and you're going to try to harvest it as many times as possible. And so, our legacy sites are all set up with the hoop houses, 10,000 square foot of canopy, roughly 3,000 to 3,500 15-gallon smart pots, drip stakes for irrigation. Those are a mix of things. We have some that are like a soilless mix. We have some that have been heavily amended over the years. And so each site is super unique. And so we have been working on standardizing. But as we grow, we're also able to move away from that kind of methodology altogether. So at the new sites, we did a couple of different things. Our end goal is really, native soil planting is the easiest, to scale past a quarter acre. It is way more cost effective. And man, the plants we grew, beautiful. The terps were through the roof. I can't even tell you. Like, they were smaller. They probably didn't yield as much, but, we're still getting our numbers in, but beautiful. And so at those sites, we did half native soil. So we cleared an area. We did soil sampling, and then we amended as appropriate. Lots of organic matter, a couple hot composts, compost tea. And then at those same sites, we also did, a soilless mix in raised beds with, mineral salts and really heavily supplementing beneficial bacteria and fungus. And so, it just kind of depends for us. We're really moving more towards the native planting, but, we're not all in yet.
Yep. No, that definitely, it's a process. And, yeah, definitely, with the beauty of this plant that we're dealing with is each strain, each genetic, each cultivar always reacts a little different, and figuring out how that fits into the model is always the challenge, But yeah, man, that sounds pretty cool. It sounds pretty, it sounds like you got a good team to be able to keep all that going. And
man, it's only the team. It's everybody out here is crazy hardworking, and I enjoy doing the indoor. I miss it to a certain extent. I like the routine, getting maybe 6 harvests a year. I love that. But, farming is cool in the sense that it all happens so fast. And so we're already gearing up propagation in the nursery. We're going to have to cut around 60,000 starts, and we've got a small nursery. And so we're getting creative with how to make it happen. But it's 100% the team. I mean, it becomes 10, 12-hour a day grind for 6-8 months, and it's starting to ramp up right now, and you don't get it done unless you have a killer team.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, man, that's it's wild. Now, you were saying that, I know when we were talking last, that some of the locations, like you said, some are irrigated with stakes, but some of them you have to try to get water too. Is that right? Or
yeah, we have sites that are fully off grid, so no electricity, no water, and so at that site, and it's hard to grow weed without electricity and water, on a rocky hill. To your point, but we've got rainwater capture, and so at that site, you'd asked about our methodology. Each one's a little unique, and on that one, we've learned that you have to be light with the fertility. It gets a ton of sunlight. And you go through water really quickly. They had a really low water holding capacity in the media, lots of perlite. And so we're going to amend with vermiculite. We're going to hit it with a really nice inoculant. I don't know if you ever heard of Sim Soil. We're probably going to use their stuff where, high fungal content. We'll run compost teas and really try to, do more of a quote unquote organic approach and build the soil food web. And so, we're learning, and each site is so unique. Like, I can't even tell you. And so we have one this season that's going to be nothing but native soil. And so, I'm excited to play with that one. But at the same time, it's like I'm terrified of gophers and them fucking up my whole season. And so, it's a balance. And so, we're learning every day. But, certain sites are easier than others. That's for sure.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds challenging. We've been using a product which is like a high in kelp, which is Recharge. I don't know if you're familiar with that, but we do kind of a once a week drench. We are using cocoa, and then we do have emitters running Jack's nutrients, and I believe
Love Jack.
Yeah, you guys are using Jack's at some of your locations. Is that right?
Totally, definitely in the nursery. We love that stuff. The kelp, are you guys using it foliarly, or are you guys hitting the roots?
We're hitting roots. The product itself has a 40% increase in kelp, and then we add a little bit more, and just to kind of combat some of the systemically for PM, just to see if that kind of helps. And we do that once a week up to week 5, I think, and then we kind of back off of it as we go into flush.
What else do you guys do for PM? You guys ever use the Rainutria? I think is the species extract. They got it in Milgard and Regalia.
No, I have not heard of that. Is that a foliar spray or?
It's a foliar. Yeah, it's a plant extract. I want to say it's from Asia or Australia. I can't even remember.
Wow.
But they're still kind of figuring out the method of action. But supposedly it induces systemic resistance.
And what's it called again?
The species is Reynotria. Products that contain it are Milgard,
okay,
and Regalia. from Marone.
No, definitely.
So this helps the plant to defend itself?
Exactly.
Like it on a cellular level?
Tougher. Yeah, they make them green, dude. I've used it in the field. Definitely use it early in flower, particularly on the late runs, and it makes the plants greener. It reminds me of like if you do a kelp foliar. I mean, they bounce. It's pretty awesome.
Oh wow, nice. No, I'll definitely look into those for sure. No, not obviously we do as much as we can environmentally to kind of combat PM. The one product that we use is a citric acid, which is Procytic. I don't know if you're familiar.
Citric acid's great.
Yeah, and with that, we're able to go a longer period of time without having to do any sprays or foliar sprays, because that product seems to, its longevity seems to last a lot longer than Xerotol. I am not a fan of Xerotol by any means. It does not work. It's just it more or less aggravates any kind of spores that I feel like it might lay them dormant for a day, but it really does just increase the spread of spores throughout the house. And from what I've seen, I'm not a fan of it.
Yeah, I think you have to have a super particular approach with Xerotol, because with that stuff, you're eradicating everything. And so I'm right there with you. If you're going to use it, you got to use it all the time. And so
and that's the thing, is that's such a common practice. That's one product that's really pushed throughout this industry, especially as you get larger, because that specific product is able to feed the needs of all these large corporations and companies, so I feel like that's one of the reasons why it's like on the list of things that everyone uses. But no, it's great to hear organically other ways of trying to combat these things and do it the right way.
Yeah, how is that?
Do you find that there's certain varieties that are more susceptible that you guys run?
Oh yeah, definitely. There's definitely like our Banana Kush, our Crescendo cookies. We had a couple. We got rid of some of our old cuts, like our Star Tribe, our Bear Dance, which is like a humble.
Bear Dance, I love. Uzbekistani hash plant, dude.
Yeah, that's a humble.
PM. I never grew that one, but I love it.
Yeah, I think that's a Humboldt County one, isn't it? I'm not too sure. I know there's a Humboldt cross in there for sure. Those ones are definitely a little bit more systemic. Once it pops up, there seem to be a little bit more prone to it spreading a little faster, and it's just staying on those. They become the hot spot in the house. We're like trying to keep that at bay and keep that contained. And we do a pretty good job. Things, obviously, if there's not any anomalies, that always can and will occur, is what I like to think. Is if you plan on growing cannabis for many years, then you're going to experience temperature spikes, humidity spikes. You've got to go through the motions to be well versed.
You name it.
yeah, you name it. You go through the motions, and we've definitely gotten better in dialing all those things in. And not saying it's necessarily 100% eradicated all the time, but we've got it pretty controlled at this point. But as we get
hard to eradicate anything, man. We've struggled with thrips in particular in the greenhouse. There's just certain ones. Now we're trying new approaches. We're releasing more biocontrols. Hopefully they get eaten. And so I was going to ask you for PM, something we found is super helpful, air exchange in the night cycle. So getting 2 or 3 full air exchanges really seem to help reduce, any sort of PM load.
Yeah, definitely towards, especially as you get towards the end of flower there and things are getting a little bit more packed in. We definitely came to that realization. Obviously we're not in beautiful California, so once it gets in that colder time during the winter, it's just a lot harder for us to do that. And then for whatever reason, we'll get those microclimates occurring at night and until like the shades open or there's more circulation. It's tough, man. It's just it's really knowing the environment prior to you can prior to I don't know how to say it. I guess prior to actually you growing, you have to know that what.
Yeah, no, you're right.
Prior to
know what the plant is looking for before you throw it in there.
Yeah,
I completely get what you're saying.
Yeah, so and that's the thing is, or else you're always going to be working out those anomalies and issues until you can actually really resolve them. And like you said, it's not like having a Ferrari where you're kind of doing a little bit of a makeshift Honda Accord that it'll run a long time, but you kind of got to show it some love too. So, you know what I mean? So, no, man, it sounds like you guys are doing a good job. And what's the plan and the goal with Henry's? Obviously producing high grade sun-grown flower and getting towards that organic, sustainable life kind of growing. It seems like you guys are in that direction. And
that's it, man. And supporting the Mendocino community. That's the big deal. Is it's hard out here to be legal. If you look at my neighborhood from Google Maps, you'd probably laugh. Everybody's got 6 to 25 in their backyard. And, it's hard to get permitted. California has not made it easy. And, so we also provide jobs for people who, maybe can't go through the permitting process and who still want to grow really high quality weed. And so, I think it's multifaceted. We want to provide that product to everybody in the state and, hopefully at some point beyond the state. But we want to take care of things here at home first.
Okay. Now, where does your flower end up on? Are you guys a wholesaler? Do you guys have a storefront?
We have a very small storefront. It's really just for like people passing through Laytonville, California. If you're going in between Humboldt and Mendo, definitely stop in. But, primarily we sell to dispensaries who sell our product. And so I think we're carried at the vast majority of stores at this point. I think we're like the number 2 pre-roll in the state.
Oh, wow.
People are finding out about Henry's.
Wow. That's huge, man. Like, that's pretty big. California's a pretty big state. Yeah. Now, any hopes of getting into doing anything else, like concentrates? Or you guys really just focusing on the flower right now and making that, streamlining that process and getting that going? And hopefully, I know what we were talking before about maybe the owners would be into going the concentrate or the solventless route. I know that's probably
Dr. Jamie, if you're listening, and we're trying to get you on the solventless train.
Yeah, exactly. Because I think that from what it sounds like you guys are doing, I'd love to try your flower if I ever get out that way, for sure. And if you're ever...
If you come by, dude, you got to come by the house here. We'll give you the grand tour, man. Yeah. You, Matt Marshall, anybody who is coming on down, particularly from there in Colorado. You guys have been doing it big for a long time, and I don't think that you guys necessarily get the respect you deserve.
No,
as being top cultivators growing, craft flower.
Yeah, exactly, man. I think we're kind of, we haven't been on that cusp of the whole breeding thing. That's the thing that I realize now is like how much of the breeders really dictate the hype and the drive of kind of the industry and what's changing. When you got like things like gelato and wedding cake and cookies and all these things that are coming out of different states, and Colorado's just kind of, we haven't had that breeding market which gets us that recognition where you go, oh, that's from Colorado. You know what I mean? Like, that's
such hype. I mean, do you, out of all the stuff you named, the gelato, the cookies?
No, and I know it's hype. We've got great genetics here. Like our Coltrane, the Coal Creek Kush. It was one of my favorite strains here in Colorado that you can only get it here. And no, we got some great genetics. But I mean, as far as that type of
the cough, didn't the cough derive from Colorado?
Strawberry cough, and the cough,
or even before it was strawberry. Like when it was just the cough.
The cough, yeah.
That was that Fort Collins thing.
Yeah, man.
But there's very little.
But that's what I mean. I'm not saying that we need the hype or that kind of recognition, but that's the recognition that people start going, oh, Colorado. We're known for weed for sure, like guaranteed. But I mean, we're just kind of on the model we have is great. I think we've got the model that most corporations and most where it's going to take it state to state. We've got a good model for that, for sure. But no, yeah, man, weed is weed, and weed is good all over the place as long as you know what you're looking for, and you know what I mean. You can find a connoisseur or a snob out there in all states that's like, I know where it's at. I know because I'm definitely like that, bro. I'm like, where is the good stuff? So no, man, it sounds great. Now what I thought was interesting too about what you were telling me when we talked previous was like one of the biggest challenges is getting those houses covered for the light depth and not getting fined for light pollution. And a lot of people don't realize that you can get fined for those things, and that's kind of a regulatory thing that people don't know about.
Oh man, there's so many hoops, no pun intended. It's tough, man. What's interesting about California is you have several different regulating bodies that all kind of work together, to get a license. And so you got to go through the Fish and Wildlife, you got to go through the Water Board, you got to go through building and permitting. So you've got all these disparate agencies that all need something different. And, I feel sorry for a lot of the people that, tried to get compliant, couldn't make it work. To your point, Colorado did it right. They made it, a little easier. I think California's heart was in the right place. It just, on paper, it's not worked out well.
Yeah, no. Well, California's it's different from one end to the other as far as like kind of the culture and the scene. It's pretty eclectic of different people and different things. So I think that's probably one of the reasons it's been like kind of a Wild West out there. And finally, like you said, their heart's in the right place and definitely have spearheaded the way for the movement for sure. And Colorado's, I think, has just kind of been that spoiled kid who's been kind of been having good weed for a long time. That's how I felt, bro. It's like we've just been spoiled, and because for me personally, when I think of going somewhere else, now Cali's the one place I can go and be like, okay, I can get weed there and I'm good. But anywhere else I think of, I'm like, man, I'm gonna have some issues probably finding it, trying to get it. What's the quality like? And like I'm just spoiled living in Colorado, like knowing the spots and knowing where to go, and like having good friends that grow good organic and all those things. Like Matt, Matt spoils me for sure. And
his homegrown was the best, dude. And that's the thing is, the best weed I don't think it's ever sold at dispensaries. It's given to your friends, in glass jars. And I think that, or even just a fat stinky sack. Like I think that most people, I guess what I was trying to get at with the cookies comment, kind of shitting on that is, they're all right genetics. I don't love growing a lot of them. As far as yield, they're boutique. Not them are very pest resistant. Yep. But there's heat out there, and I think that it's our job as cultivators to educate people that it's not the Tilrays and the canopies that are gonna it's gonna be like Budweiser. Right? The vast majority of people are gonna think whatever, like this is weed. It is what it is, and I think there'll always be that craft market, but I think it's our job to educate people.
Yeah, exactly. And, with that said, the whole aspect of the cannabinoids and the profile of the plant itself, and even though it's not high potency, but maybe it helps with my insomnia or my headaches or my my lack of appetite or whatever it is, man. It's a medicine that I think that, in its purest form, it's just the mindset of it and appreciating it for that as well, is something that goes hand in hand with like, appreciating good herbs, even high grade, you know what I mean? So yeah, it's crazy. But yeah, like you were I was saying, with those houses now, getting those shades up, is that how challenging is that? How do you guys operate with that?
So we're trying something new this season. We're going to employ a night crew who more or less gets them on in the evenings, and then when we arrive for regular cultivation work in the mornings, we'll pull them off. But you know how important it is, man. A little light leak in your greenhouse will toast you. Leaving the covers off for a full night. You're depending on the variety, you're looking at Herm City, and it's a tough look, or even worse. And so tarps is probably the most labor intensive thing that we do. I don't think people understand how hard that aspect is unless you've done it, unless you've spent a whole season grinding out every morning, every night, pulling tarps 12 hours apart. It's hard work, man.
Yeah, for sure, man. That's
there are ways that you can automate it a little more, and we're looking into that, to make it a little easier and not so labor intensive. But like I said, some of our facilities are just out in the sticks. What's
the size of the team like to do that? Like, how many people are pulling tarps up like one time?
Typically, putting them on, you have at least 2 people. Makes a site pretty quick. You should be able to knock out a 10,000 in 45 minutes or less. Assuming the tarps aren't like loaded with water and whatnot.
Yeah.
So last season when I came in, we ended up running, 6 sites. Didn't pull tarps for a ton because, it's the late season and, natural photo periods kicked in at that point. We had, I don't know, maybe like 8 people to manage 6 sites. And so, like I said, it was a grind. Everybody, all hands on deck, very long days, but we made it work. And so we learned a lot. We are going to take those experiences and be much smoother next season and not try to force as much.
Nice. Sounds good, man. It sounds like, you guys got a quite an operation and you're doing good work. I definitely am excited. I definitely want to come out. Hopefully try to make it out there this year at some point and give you the heads up and definitely, come and bring the vibes.
Please, man, I got a fat, stinky sack with your name on it. Same with you, Matt Marshall.
Awesome. That's what's up, man. Word. Well, what, I guess just kind of like spearhead this. What you guys can be found in California. Mendocino is where you guys are at. You guys are, I'm sure you don't need the plug as far as shops and everything, but if there any information that you want people to know, where they can find you or what's on the horizon.
To your point, man, Henry's sales team is awesome. They definitely get the product out there. They're really diligent with in-store demos. Education is a key component. And so, I'm sure they can find us on the Instagram. I think it's Henry's Original. And, we're out there. Pick us up.
Nice. That's what's up, man. Cool, brother. Well, I appreciate you coming on the podcast and, letting us know what you're doing. It's always interesting to hear, what somebody's doing, especially on a large scene now. I guess the other question I didn't get to ask is, with those apps and what you've been doing there, are you able to, integrate that into Henry's right now? Are they open to, some of this stuff? I know you probably already do, but, on a big scale for the whole company, is that something that you've been able to bring over, cross over from the last job?
Totally. Like I said, man, it's just, having the diligence to create a program. And so, we recorded a lot of data last season. We're still parsing through it as we get through post-harvest activities. And, we're going to expand some of those data points, hoping to implement some more technology to automate it. For our nursery, we have a Link 4 system, and so we've got that on the cloud now, and we're trying to, get some of that information as far as temperature and humidity automated as well. And so, we're doing the same stuff. I'm definitely a data guy, and so we're going to record it, we're going to use it, and man, if anybody out there is listening isn't, it's as simple as starting a spreadsheet. I think that you'll find use out of it.
Yeah,
it's definitely helped me a ton.
Definitely, man. I agree. I'm all about that, collecting data and being open-minded on what you're looking for and how to use it. Even a notebook, bro, journals is something I think should be done. Calendars, journals, spreadsheet, all those things can be utilized and be so helpful and as a resource to look back on, and not just look back on, but kind of pinpoint where you're going. I worked for Silver Peak, which is a dispensary located in Aspen. They had a grow in Basalt and Aspen Valley right outside Snowmass, and it was one of those Ferrari grows. They built it out and they knew exactly what they wanted to do, and then they built out their laboratory, which I helped start the solventless division, doing some freeze-dried solventless washing for them and pressing rosin as well. And man, that was it's cool to see all the data collected, because the guys I worked for, they literally, I had no idea at the time, but they worked for the Department of Defense. So the data collection was through the roof. Yeah, bro, it was to the minute. The one kid I worked with, he ended up with PAX doing R&D for their pens, because he while he was working at the company we were working for, he was also teamed up with PAX, and they ended up bringing him on and hiring him out in Boston. But he's the kid I would coordinate with to do solventless and learn some new techs on how to do the Frenchy cannoli style of hash, and how to do some hash coins, and just improving the process of washing and stuff like that. So the type of data we would collect is they would be, they'd give me a piece of paper and they would say, hey man, write down what minute you start doing this and what minute you stop doing this. And then what minute you start doing the next thing you start doing, right? So it's like literally one task micromanaged to the minute. And I did that for a year, but after about 4 or 5 months, they brought me upstairs and they're like, hey man, look at this. And they showed me like literally an algorithm of all the washing that I had done on strains, specifically on what strains peaked at what point of my wash when I did certain things. So it was like literally just this algorithm of my work, strain specific. And they did it in red, gold, and green. And he goes, I thought you'd like that. Wow. And I was so geeked out about the whole it being red, gold, and green. And that's I'm the easiest pushover, bro. You know what I mean? You make it Rasta for me, I'm like, all right, I got you. You know what I mean? But no,
but how easy was that? All you had to do was, sure, you probably hated it the first month, like pain in the ass. But by month 4, when you got that payout, I'm sure you learned so much, and you could.
Oh yeah, no, yeah, exactly. What kind of my process, knowing the process and being sure about it, and not having any doubts. All the doubts were wiped away. Like I feel very confident when giving yield on strains and what I can do and how I can produce it because I've done the research and the data. So yeah, no, it was great. My issue is like, so the kid that I worked side by side with would, I'd be like into starting my process. I'd be 10 minutes in and he'd come in and he'd be like, yo man, what's up? How was your weekend, bro? I was like, oh man, it was good. What'd you do? And I'd tell him what I did. And what'd you do? And he'd be like, yeah, we chop it up. 10 minutes went by, didn't think nothing of it. Next day I'd get pulled upstairs and they'd be like, hey Ronnie, so what happened during this 10 minutes right here where you kind of had this lag in your work? And I said, well, man, dude came in and asked me how my day was. And you know what I mean? And then he'd go, and I looked at him and he'd go, oh, that's just human error. It would just chalk it up to human error. And I was like, human error? You know what I mean? So it was that type of stuff where it was like, dude didn't want to be held accountable for him making me, fall behind in production. But, it's just funny how they handle that. But that was kind of the stuff.
Yeah. See, I like the data for the data and for getting better at your operation. Like to your point, improving your process. But when it's used for micromanagement like that, that's a bummer.
Yeah, man. And so that was the one thing that's kind of ultimately what the stress of that job, led me to kind of moving on. Is they gave me the machine, bro. They gave me the perfect, RO system hooked up to an RO ice machine, 4 washers, a freeze dryer, 2 rosin Sasquatch presses, a walk-in freezer to store everything, racks to store all the product on. They gave me the machine, bro. And then were feeding me more equipment to learn more tech. So I was, all that stuff was cool, but it was so inundated with micromanagement and stuffy, like a corporate stuffy laboratory, that it kind of took away from us being able to progress, because literally it did. We kind of were like running with our shoes tied together because we only had 4 strains. We had Gorilla Glue, Biochem, Jilly Bean, and like one other strain that we would only do this process on until they could collect all this data to really, they didn't pull the trigger fast enough. We collected all the data, and then 6 months went by, and all we've been pushing is the same 4 strains to the same companies every week, every month. And you can't do that. You got to have some variety to be able to, and we had a stable of strains because they had to grow. They just didn't want to. They wanted to focus on these 4 strains and understanding them before we could move forward. And after 6-7 months went by, it was like, okay, now we're going to do one more strain. And it's like, no, man, just give us everything and let's process it all and see what we can do. So that kind of stuff just slowed us down from progressing. And then ultimately what did it was they started doing construction on Glenwood Springs at the bridge, and there was one bridge that connected Aspen to Glenwood, and I lived in Glenwood, but I worked in like a couple towns up in Carbondale, where they had moved their lab to. So my commute went from waking up and being at work within 10 minutes to waking up and being at work within an hour and a half. And that was, you know, and then my commute home went from being, you know, 15, 20 minutes to 2 hours because of the bridge construction. And this went on for about a month and a half to where I became manic. Like I'd wake up and I was like, felt like I did not get any sleep because I'd just been in a car all day. And then I was in this like stuffy lab and I just started to lose.
Same four varieties.
Yeah, man. No, and writing everything down to the minute, bro. I was losing it. So one day I felt like I didn't get any sleep, bro. I sat in the car all night, got home. It was dark. My kids were already sleeping. I ate, went to bed, woke up to get in the car to see, you know, and the fact that you're 10 minutes away from where you need to be, but you're moving, it takes you an hour and a half to get there. You know what I mean? It's a psychological head game. And so I ended up getting to work one day, and my manager was like, "Hey, Ronnie, how's it going?" And I was in like the locker room, like getting ready. And he was a bubbly dude. Like, you know, he was always bouncing around and all bubbly. And he kind of favored me. So he admired me as far as being a hash guru and shit. And so he didn't like bust my balls about anything. But after this day, like he came in, he's like, "Hey, Ronnie, how's it going?" And I was like, "Well," and I just like kind of like went off, and so much so I had to go back to him and apologize. Like during, you know, our first break, I was like, "Hey, man, I'm sorry I snapped at you." And he goes, "Yeah, man, I wasn't expecting that." And from that point on, he kind of was like treated me a little bit harsher, and you know. But at that point is when I realized that I started making my way out. So like 2 weeks later, I ended up putting in my 2 weeks, and not only did I, but the 4 guys that we all worked the lab. We all quit the same day, and we all moved to the down to where I live, like 2 blocks away, to the new facility, this new greenhouse that had been built right by the river, very similar to where I'm at now. But yeah, we all like put in our resignation. One person went upstairs, and then the next person went upstairs, like one after another. So the guy's eyes, the director, his eyes were like, by the time I went up there, and I was the heavy hit because I was like, you know, the guru guy, and I came up and was like, "Yeah, man, I'm leaving." And, man, you should have seen his face. But yeah, man. So anyways,
there's a lot of that in this new industry where you've got people like yourself who are legitimate experts in a craft, and the need to commoditize that craft and to turn it into a business is, you know, I've seen it cause a lot of friction in similar exits where, you know, enough people have had it, and you know, it's just really interesting to see.
Yeah, no, and so the background on that company, is they had enough capital to throw around to really make it move. And so the one thing was that one owner, his family background was, I believe his family, from what I understood, built the clock tower in Times Square. So that was like his family and where they had gotten their money or whatever. And then the other guy was the guy who owned the franchise of Red Robin and had sold out. And so these 2 guys got together and decided to do a grow and a dispensary in Aspen, and it was really nice. It was really nice, and they had a lot of potential. And then when I came aboard, you know, they were like, they were literally would take my advice. They really, you know, I worked with the marketing team, and you know, they really respected me, but I felt like that micromanagement and not being a part of the culture of herb, because that's the thing, is that they didn't want to be associated with like high times. They wanted to kind of recreate this idea of what the cannabis experience is. And I felt like that kind of hindered them on actually growing within the industry. You kind of already isolated yourself out of it. You know what I mean? And trying to recreate it and rebrand it in a certain way, when there's certain things you just kind of got to go with, because it goes hand in hand with just the culture of cannabis. So that's kind of what I felt like kind of, you know, slowed their momentum with how they wanted to operate. And, you know, all a bunch of good guys, great people, and, you know, I have nothing bad to say about anybody I worked with. And just I felt like that was just kind of what slowed us down in the progress. But that goes with anything, because the last place, the place that I moved to, the guy sold me hook, line, and sinker. He's like, "Yeah, man, I want to be like Oleo. We're going to do solventless hash. We're going to do the fire stuff. We're going to put out best cookies and all these exotic strains, and he had like seeds, exotic cuts and all this stuff.
Yeah.
And I was like, I had wrote down all the equipment, everything I would need in order to, facilitate that. He goes, yeah, I want to be like Olio. I'm your guy, bro. I got the rep, I got the knowledge. I'm coming from a super machine right now. And so when the first day I got there, I was like, yo, man, I've got a list of all the equipment, everything we'll need. And he goes, no, we're not going to do that. We're going to do CO2. And I was like, what? And yeah, bro, like had sold me on the idea I was going to be doing like what I was doing now, but have more autonomy and more control over it. And we just needed to buy the equipment. He already had the MIP in the space, but when I got there, it was like, no, we're going to do CO2 now. And I was like, whoa, bubble burst.
Hold on it, and somebody just say, like, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, bubble burst, bro. There went my bubble, and I was like, whoa. And then so I kind of had to reinvent myself in the growing world and, like, started focusing on growing. And luckily, he was up to try new products and new things, so we got to do a whole thing. That's what ended up where I teamed up with Roots Organic, became real vital connection. They treated me like family, gave us the whole line of their products and to sample, and hooked us up. And the reps came up and visited with me, and that I was solely responsible with that relationship taking place. And and we got to trial like Dragonfly Medicine, their products. I got
dude, they do some cool stuff.
Yeah, I got to do a couple trials on a couple different harvests where I could trial both products side by side, and that was really cool. And did some phenome hunting, and so even though I got kind of like I kind of feel like I got roped into it without walking away from my career in hash to becoming, being involved in growing more. I really appreciated it because then it just gave me a better respect of cannabis and growing and not just taking it for granted, but like, it revitalized my passion to be able to go out there and like do some phenome hunting and dealing with different cultivars and, all that stuff. And, yeah, man. So it's all been good.
So now you can do both.
Now I can do both, and
I was going to say, so because you're a hashish, how do you say it, hashishan?
Yeah.
Because you know everything. Are you looking at the plants with that lens? Like, are you looking at the gland?
Yeah, always, most definitely, always, bro, always. And that's what I mean is I can break down, and that's the thing is like with bringing up a line of different products, a product line. I've got it in me now off a solventless base. I can give you 5 different products that you can run with that are all solventless created, and we can stretch that out to 7 or 8 if you really want to do it and you really appreciate it. And looking at strains, and when someone goes, oh, that strain's shit, I can tell you why I appreciate it and in what profile, if it's terpene or cannabinoid or CBG or whatever it is. Like I've got that much knowledge on both ends that I just appreciate both worlds of it. And that's what I was saying. I've said it a lot more recently, is that a lot of people to have that knowledge of coming from both ends is very rare. Someone who does concentrates and someone who grows flowers to a point where they've gained enough knowledge that like they're like, okay, I know exactly what to do on both ends of this. I've cut out the middleman per se, or just knowing one half of it. So no, man, I all of it is just education. I'm talking right now the last couple of days with this woman who's got some apps going right now out in Trinidad and Tobago, and Barbados right now is about to become legal, and she's telling me how it works down there, as it's who you know and whose family knows who. A lot of the family, if they're in politics, they give those jobs to their son or their daughter or their aunt, their nephews. So it's kind of like how that trickle down works. But she's we've been talking, going back and forth, where she wants me to probably help some of the growers deal with the issues of growing down there, and they're similar, doing hoop houses, but they're not doing amendments to the soil. They're not, everything turns into a sativa plant, and by the end of its harvest, and it's seeded, and there are a lot of environmental issues alongside just proper plant nurturing. But, it's excited to think that's potential in my future, is being able to go down to, Trinidad or Barbados. They're saying Barbados is the first big place next to Jamaica that's going to have that, and the government's behind it. So she just texted me
bring that knowledge, or else they're going to keep growing this seedy sativa looking garbage.
Yeah, exactly. And, so that's what I was explaining to her. It's the love of growing. It's just it's all knowledge, and how much you can take that knowledge and that's the proprietary stuff that makes us all unique and furthers our growth, like you with the apps and taking that information and appreciating it, working and knowing what it takes to work in the garden, seeing the bigger picture of like, how can I scale this up? How can we multiply what we're doing, and being able to prove that to someone. I mean, that's all, props to you, bro, and what you do, because it's not easy. And you seem like a pretty humble dude. I'd love to sit down and blaze one up with you, brother, because mad respects. I could see why Matt recommended for me to talk to you. So,
oh, get out of here, man! I cannot even believe all the nice things. But no, please, if you're ever up here, I'd love to partake with you. Show you what we do. I'm humbled just to be able to, survive capitalism by working with the plant, to be honest. And, I know that there's certain things, like scale, that are, necessary. You gotta be able to run a business. It's nice to just, tend a garden, but, it's also, a crop. And, to your point about data, there's varieties that we grew, like, chocolate hashberry. It's awesome. It would probably be a killer hash strain, but we grow flower, and so we're trying to identify what we do and weed that stuff out. And
that's
if you're ever up here, that's to show you what we do.
Yeah, for sure, man. I definitely will take you up on that offer, man. Hopefully, me and Matt can make it happen together. That'd be dope. But yeah, I definitely think that's something that is dope. Is that the passion for it, and keep doing good work, brother. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you guys.
Yeah, for sure, man. So, if you want to give out your IG handle or anywhere somebody can check out what you're doing, or if I guess Henry's Original on IG is where they can check your workout.
For sure. I think mine is, what is mine? Jason Scott Arnold. It's my name. There you go.
There you go. Easy enough, man. And I appreciate you coming on, Wear the Crown. And, episode 10, I'll give you, this will be up here in a couple days, hopefully. So, we'll let you plug that once it's up. But yeah, man, I hope you keep doing it.
I can't say how much I appreciate it. I was super nervous, even talking to you guys. Like I said, much respect. You guys are extremely knowledgeable, and it's awesome. Like I said, I'm super humbled just to be able to spend some time, chopping it up with y'all.
Cool, man. Well, take care, brother. And, I look forward to getting out there. I look forward to seeing the work, and hope things prosperous and go well for you.
Much love, guys. I appreciate y'all.
All right, brother.
Every time.
See ya.
Bless
Bye.